If your day has been a little too noisy, this is a good place to pause. Today's list isn't about big headlines or nonstop bad news. It's about incredible discoveries, people fixing problems, bonding with animals, and making things a little better than they were before. So before your brain runs off in 6 directions at once, let's slow it down with a few genuinely relaxing facts. I'm Mike with List 25, and these are 25 relaxing random facts that will reduce your stress. 25. A drive-thru food pantry feeds thousands of people for free. In Santa Ana, California, cars line up early at a drive-thru food pantry, sometimes hours before it opens. Drivers pull forward and volunteers place 2 weeks' worth of groceries directly into their trunks, all at no cost. The Seva Collective operates in a neighborhood considered a food desert, where access to fresh food can be limited. The pantry began during the COVID-19 pandemic and has continued to grow through volunteer support and partnerships with food banks, farms, and local organizations. Each month, it distributes tens of thousands of pounds of food to more than 1,000 families, creating a reliable source of groceries that many households now count on. 24. Children and dogs produce more oxytocin when they're together. Scientists from the National Institutes of Health measured what happens inside children's bodies when they spend time with dogs. And oh boy, are you going to love what they found. When children played with their family dog, they produced higher levels of oxytocin than when they played alone. The effect was strongest between kids and their own dogs, but it didn't disappear with unfamiliar ones. Even spending time with a calm dog they'd never met led to higher oxytocin levels than playing without a dog at all. Oxytocin is often associated with trust, comfort, and social bonding, and the dog's levels rose as well during those same interactions, which also helps to explain why the presence of a dog works so well in therapeutic settings. The connection isn't just comforting on the surface, but also helps us on a biological level, reinforcing emotional regulation in both directions. 23. Humpback whales are using bubbles to communicate with us. Humpback whales are already known for using bubbles to hunt and to compete with each other. But researchers have noticed something different during common encounters with humans. In several documented cases, humpbacks approached boats or swimmers and released large, carefully formed bubble rings in their direction. These weren't feeding events, and there was no sign of aggression or stress. In a study published in Marine Mammal Science, researchers analyzed dozens of these bubble rings made by whales of different ages. Because the behavior didn't match hunting or social signaling with other whales, scientists think the bubbles may be a part of a curious exploratory interaction. It's like they wanted to see how the humans responded. It doesn't mean they're trying to talk to us, but it does show they're paying close attention and choosing to engage. 22. Poachers are being caught by listening AI. In parts of Central Africa, poaching often happens deep inside rainforests, where patrols can't easily reach, and gunshots disappear into the constant noise of insects, birds, and falling trees. To combat this, scientists have started turning the forest itself into a listening network. Hundreds of low-power microphones have now been placed across protected areas in countries like Gabon, Congo, and Cameroon. The system was developed by researchers at Cornell University's Center for Conservation Bioacoustics, alongside the Elephant Listening Project. Using AI, the microphones can tell the difference between a real gunshot and things like cracking branches or thunder. The moment multiple sensors hear the same shot, the system triangulates the location and alerts rangers with the exact coordinates, allowing patrols to respond while the poaching is still happening. 21. One of Europe's rarest cats is making a comeback. For a while, the Iberian lynx looked like it might disappear entirely. By the early 2000s, the number of this incredibly beautiful small wild cat, native to Spain and Portugal, had dropped to just over 60 adults in the wild. Habitat loss, declining prey, and run-ins with vehicles had pushed it to the edge, earning it a critically endangered listing. What came next was years of steady, coordinated conservation. There were breeding programs, habitat restoration, road crossings, and protection of rabbit populations that all came together and slowly changed the picture. Each year, the numbers rose. By 2024, the Iberian lynx population had passed 2,000 animals across several regions. That recovery was strong enough for the International Union of Conservation of Nature to officially downlist the species from critically endangered to vulnerable. 20. Your heart beats over 100,000 times a day. No matter what your day looks like, your heart keeps working in the background. It speeds up when you move, slows down when you rest, and does it all without asking for your attention. Most of the time, your heart goes about its work quietly. At rest, it beats roughly once every second. Over a full day, that steady pace adds up to more than 100,000 beats, pumping thousands of gallons of blood through miles of blood vessels spread throughout your body. That rhythm continues while you sleep and while your focus is elsewhere, guided by the heart's own electrical system. Over weeks, months, and years, the pattern stays remarkably stable. Researchers are also finding new ways to support that system. Recent work in experimental gene therapy has shown promise in improving heart muscle function in people with heart failure, opening the door to future treatments for a condition that affects millions worldwide. 19. Most of the world is now free of wild polio. At one point, polio was widespread across much of Africa, spreading rapidly and leaving lifelong paralysis in its wake. That long fight reached a major milestone in August 2020 when the World Health Organization officially certified the African region as free of wild poliovirus after 4 consecutive years without a single case. This didn't happen through one breakthrough or a short campaign. It came from sustained vaccination efforts across 47 countries, often in difficult conditions that included conflict zones, remote communities, and high population movement. Health workers, volunteers, and local leaders worked door to door to reach children who had been missed before. As of that certification, wild polio remains active in only 2 countries worldwide. Today, more than 90% of the world's population lives in regions where it's been eradicated. 18. We're tackling the plastics problem with farm waste. A large portion of plastic waste comes from packaging that's used once and discarded. So researchers at the University of British Columbia have started working on a material that could change that pattern using something most farms already have in excess. They created a biodegradable plastic film from cereal grasses and wheat straw, materials that are usually treated as waste. The process reshapes tough plant fibers into a clear, durable material that behaves much like conventional plastic. It can be shaped, handled, and used in similar ways, but it doesn't depend on fossil fuels. And when it's finally discarded, it biodegrades rather than accumulating in landfills or waterways. Because this material comes from agricultural leftovers, it doesn't compete with food production, and it also turns an existing waste stream into something useful. 17. Some plastic waste can now pull carbon out of the air. While I'm on the subject of rethinking plastic, some researchers are taking a different approach and finding ways to make it useful again. Chemists at the University of Copenhagen developed a material made from recycled plastic bottles that can capture carbon dioxide from the air. The process doesn't require extreme heat or heavy industrial equipment. The material absorbs CO2 at lower temperatures and then releases it when gently warmed, which makes the whole system far more energy efficient than traditional carbon capture methods. Because the material is made from common PET plastic, it's cheap, durable, and relatively easy to scale up. That means the same waste-causing environmental headaches could end up playing a role in reducing emissions, rather than just piling up in landfills. 16. Fear responses can be dialed down over time. Fear is useful, but it doesn't always know when to stop. Sometimes it reacts even after a situation turns out to be harmless. Researchers at University College London showed this by giving animals a visual signal that looked like danger, an expanding shadow from above, similar to how a predator might approach. At first, the animals reacted by fleeing, but when that same signal appeared again and again without anything bad happening, their behavior changed. They stopped running and stayed calm. What the researchers found is that the brain didn't erase the original fear response. Instead, it stored a new memory that said the situation was safe. Over time, that safety signal took priority. This helps explain why fear often fades through experience. When the brain sees repeated proof that nothing goes wrong, it learns to stand down. 15. Almost every living thing uses the same genetic code. Every living thing you've ever heard of builds proteins using basically the same translation system. That's why human insulin can be made in bacteria. DNA is read in 3-letter chunks called codons, and those codons map onto amino acids, the building blocks of proteins. The same design shows up in bacteria, trees, and people alike. There are some small exceptions, but the core setup is shared across almost all life. What that means is that biology is not reinventing itself from scratch in every species. Life has been using a stable set of rules for a very long time, and most of what changes from organism to organism is what gets built with the code, not the basic language itself. So even though life evolves, the basic setup hasn't really changed. 14. China is using solar farms to push the desert back. Some of China's largest solar farms are going up in places that used to be written off as empty desert. In Inner Mongolia, these projects generate huge amounts of electricity, enough to power hundreds of thousands of homes. But the panels are only part of the story. Beneath them, the land is being put to work. Farmers and engineers are planting sand-fixing grasses and plants under the rows of solar panels, using the shade and reduced wind to help vegetation survive. The plants hold the soil in place and slow the spread of desert conditions that have been creeping outward for years. Instead of choosing between energy production and land restoration, this approach does both at once. 13. Bees are making honey from spotted lanternfly honeydew. By late summer, nectar sources usually start thinning out, but bees still need to collect food. In areas heavily affected by spotted lanternflies, they've found another option. Lanternflies feed on tree sap and excrete honeydew, a sugar-rich liquid that bees can gather and convert into honey using their usual process. This honey looks darker and has a stronger smell than spring or early summer varieties. Some people enjoy its smoky flavor, while others prefer to skip it, but beekeepers have learned that it only appears for a short window each year. Because of that timing, it usually doesn't mix with traditional honey harvests and acts as a bonus supply rather than a replacement, giving bees extra food going into winter. It even increases overall yield, since bees keep working during a period when they might otherwise slow down. 12. A dancing gorilla photo won a top award. The top prize at the 2025 Nikon Comedy Wildlife Photography Awards went to British photographer Mark Methcone in Rwanda for his picture of a very happy, possibly dancing gorilla. The competition exists to show the lighter side of the animal kingdom while also supporting wildlife conservation. It invites entries from both amateurs and professionals, and no AI or major digital editing is allowed, so every winning image comes from a real moment. The awards include multiple categories and prizes like camera gear and even a safari trip for the overall winner. And while conservation is part of the bigger goal, this year's finalists gave us everything from wrestling frogs to yawning lions, showing a softer, more playful side of nature. 11. Nature is reclaiming abandoned oil refineries. When oil refineries shut down, the land they leave behind is often written off as damaged or useless. But in several places, the opposite has happened. On the Thames estuary in England, an abandoned refinery site has gradually turned into flower-rich grassland, now home to rare bees, birds, and thousands of other species. So what started as industrial leftovers became one of the most biologically diverse sites in the area. Across the Atlantic in California, former oil fields like West Coyote Hills are following the same pattern. Sections of land once used for drilling have regenerated into habitats filled with native wildlife, including threatened bird species and seasonal wetlands. Local residents have pushed to protect these spaces, recognizing their value not just for animals, but for people as well. 10. Bolivia has a group of women who climb mountain in skirts. The Cholitas Escalandoras are indigenous Aymara women who have summited some of the highest peaks in the Andes. Their climbs follow the same routes and safety standards as any other mountaineer, using helmets, ice axes, and ropes, often in harsh weather and low oxygen conditions. The key difference is, they do it in skirts. The pollera skirts are everyday clothing with deep cultural roots, tied to their identity and indigenous pride. Many of these women spent years working in the mountains as cooks or porters while dressed the same way, and when they began climbing themselves, they never felt the need to change. Their climbs, including summiting Aconcagua in Argentina, show that skill and experience matter more than fitting in with the traditional image of what a mountaineer looks like. 9. Your tendency to procrastinate may be a family trait. If you procrastinate, it doesn't automatically mean you're lazy or broken. Good. A study published in Psychological Science used twin data to tease apart what's learned and what's inherited, and it found procrastination isn't just random. It's partly heritable, and so is impulsivity. The part that surprised researchers is how closely procrastination and impulsivity match up genetically. They look like opposites on the surface. One is putting things off, the other is doing something too fast. But underneath, they seem to share the same root. A lot of it comes down to goal management, meaning how well you can keep the important thing in your head while something more tempting shows up. So, procrastination often looks like a calendar problem, but it's usually an impulse problem in disguise. That makes sense, because brains built for quick, short-term decisions don't always love slow, long-term tasks. 8. Iceland is still the most peaceful country in the world. The Global Peace Index is released every year by the Institute for Economics and Peace, and it ranks over 160 countries based on things like levels of violence, military involvement, and everyday safety. For the past few years, the trend has been going the wrong way, with many countries becoming less peaceful as conflicts and political tensions increase. But Iceland continues to stand out. In the 2025 report, it was once again ranked the most peaceful country on Earth, a position it's held for nearly 2 decades. Iceland has no standing army, no navy, and no air force, and relies on a small coast guard instead. Despite this, violent crime remains rare, trust in public institutions is high, and police officers rarely carry firearms. 7. A deaf and non-speaking boy communicates with the world through art. Deaf and non-speaking since birth, Osam Khan grew up in the Rohingya refugee camps of Bangladesh without the opportunity to learn formal sign language. He relied on improvised gestures that only a small circle of friends and family understood. That changed when he began drawing and taking photographs. Art gave him a way to communicate with the world and everyone around him, without needing an interpreter. Khan now uses photography to show what life is like inside the camps, capturing moments of the people, hardship, and daily routines. And while he can't speak, his photos carry meaning on their own. 6. Outdoor work programs are helping struggling teens reconnect with themselves. With mental health concerns rising among the world's teens, some organizations are taking a very old-school approach. Instead of apps, screens, or worksheets, they're giving young people jobs that involve dirt, weather, tools, and responsibility. For example, at a place called Jamie's Farm in England, teenagers dealing with anxiety, behavior issues, or school disengagement spend a week doing hands-on farm jobs like feeding animals, cleaning stalls, harvesting vegetables, and cooking meals together. And the results have been nothing short of astonishing. A lot of the kids show improved mental well-being, better school behavior, and higher attendance months later, even after spending only a few days in these programs. Hands-on work gives them something solid to focus on, whether that's animals, tools, or a shared goal, in the process proving that confidence comes after responsibility, not before it. 5. Future humans may be better at handling respiratory viruses. When a pandemic hits, not everyone's immune system reacts the same way. Some people get very sick, while others barely notice they're infected. A growing body of research suggests that part of the difference comes down to genetics, not luck. Scientists studying COVID-19 outcomes found that certain immune-related gene variants helped people control early viral spread, especially in the respiratory system. Some of these variants even trace to ancient human relatives. As outbreaks become more frequent in a globalized world, these small advantages may start adding up across generations. And since people who consistently handle infections better are more likely to recover, reproduce, and pass those traits on, those small genetic advantages can slowly become more common. 4. We've finally fixed autocorrect. Autocorrect has a lot of power for something most of us never question. It decides what looks normal, what looks wrong, and what needs fixing. So for the longest time, basically forever, it's treated a lot of people's names like typos. A UK group called I Am Not a Typo turned that particular headache into a campaign. After months and months of pressure and collaboration, Microsoft finally updated its dictionary so thousands of legitimate names no longer trigger error warnings. It doesn't change how autocorrect works overall, but it does mean your computer is finally done arguing with you about what you're called. 3. Prehistoric bees like to use fossil bones as nurseries. About 20,000 years ago, a few bees set up a nursery inside animal bones. According to digs led by Dr. Lazaro Vignola Lopez, a paleontologist with the Field Museum in Chicago, the bones came from animals eaten by giant prehistoric owls that lived in the cave for generations. When the owls coughed up pellets full of bones, the remains piled up on the cave floor, and the bees moved in. They packed sediment into empty tooth sockets, mixed it with saliva, and used each tiny hole as a protected cradle for their eggs. With very little topsoil outside the cave and plenty of fine dirt inside, a jawbone full of ready-made compartments probably looked like prime real estate. If you're a bee looking for a safe place to raise the kids, it doesn't get much better than a skull that already has built-in rooms. 2. Two coma patients who met in the same hospital are now getting married. Zach Zarambinski and Isabel Richards crossed paths long before either could remember it. As teenagers, they were both in comas at the same Minnesota hospital after separate life-altering accidents, one from a football injury and the other from a car crash. Their mothers met in the waiting rooms, supported each other through the worst days, and hoped their kids would survive. They did survive. 6 years later, their mom stepped in again and suggested they reconnect. The two bonded over recovery, started dating, and even launched a podcast about healing after brain injuries. He popped the question back at the Regions Hospital in November 2025, right where everything started. 1. A single organization has cleared 300,000 landmines in Sri Lanka. When Sri Lanka's civil war ended in 2009, the fighting stopped, but the danger didn't. Landmines were still buried across huge areas of the north, sitting in places where people once lived, worked, and raised families. For many communities, going home simply wasn't an option. Over the past decade and a half, the Halo Trust has been methodically undoing that damage. Working district by district, their teams have now cleared more than 300,000 unexploded bombs and discarded landmines. As a result, hundreds of thousands of displaced people have returned to land they thought was lost to them forever. For the first time in years, families, old friends, and neighbors can finally go home. And that's where I'm calling it tonight, or today, or whenever you're watching this. And since I was talking about relaxing facts, let me know in the comments what is your favorite way to relax. And if this list worked for you to, help you relax, check out our related video, 25 Untrue Facts About Mental Health You Probably Believe. It's an honest look at how mental health fits into everyday life, relationships, and work without the usual stereotypes. That link should pop up right about here. As always, thank you guys for being here. Don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe with that notification bell, and I'll see you again next time.